Dylan Alvarez balanced the silver tray on one hand and knocked twice on the penthouse suite door, praying his 5-year-old daughter was still napping peacefully in the break room downstairs. The door swung open. And the woman standing there? She looked like she just stepped out of a magazine barefoot, wearing a silk robe and with the kind of face that made you forget your own name. Dylan blinked. "Room service?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Why, yeah, dinner service," Dylan said, clearing his throat, adjusting his grip as the tray wobbled dangerously. "For, miss." "Delaney Archer," she replied, stepping aside. The penthouse suite was massive. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the turquoise ocean, and furniture that probably cost more than his car. The air smelled like roses and salt water. Dylan tried not to stare as he walked in and set the tray down on a polished marble table. "You okay?" she asked, eyeing him. Dylan looked up, startled. "Yeah, I just not used to being in places like this." Delaney gave a soft laugh. "Well, it's just a hotel room." No, Dylan thought this was a castle, and she, definitely not just a guest. "Anything else?" he asked, already backing toward the door. "Actually," she paused, "do you know if the resort has childcare?" His heart skipped. Yeah, we do. I mean, yes. Work here part-time. I'm a single dad. My daughter's downstairs with one of the staff right now." Delaney tilted her head. "That's sweet." He flushed. "It's just what I have to do." She stepped closer, offering a smile that felt too warm for someone so elegant. "What's her name?" "Faye," he said, relaxing just a little. "She's 5, loves dinosaurs and thinks chocolate milk is a food group." Delaney laughed again, this time genuinely. "She sounds like someone I'd get along with." The elevator dinged in the hallway. Dylan took that as his cue. "Okay, well, enjoy your dinner, Miss Archer." He turned to leave. "Wait," she said. He paused. "I don't like eating alone," she said, shrugging. "And I ordered enough for 2. Want to join me?" That wasn't just kindness. That was something else, but Dylan knew how lines worked. She was a guest and he was a staff member. "I can't," he said, voice low. "I'd get fired." She smiled again, but this time with something unreadable in her eyes. Shame. He gave a small nod and walked out, heart pounding for reasons he didn't want to name. The next day, Dylan was back on the clock, running towels to the pool bar when he spotted her again. Delaney, this time in sunglasses and a navy blue swimsuit under a sheer cover-up, lounging like the sun owed her something. She waved him over. "Hey, Dylan, right?" He froze. She remembered his name. I'm not on floor service right now," he said. "That's okay," she said, pulling off her sunglasses. "I just wanted to say hi." He glanced around. "Hi." "You always this formal," she teased. He smiled, despite himself. Only around guests who could probably buy this whole resort. She raised an eyebrow. "Why do you assume I'm rich?" He gave her a look. She laughed. "Fair." Then she leaned forward slightly. "What do you do when you're not working?" "Take care of Faye, try to make rent, fix my neighbor's broken sink to get a discount on utilities, that kind of thing." "So basically, you're a superhero." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm just trying to survive." Delaney looked at him a second longer, then said, "You know what I think." "What?" "You need a break." "I can't afford a break." She stood suddenly. "Then let me give you one." Dylan blinked. "What?" "Dinner, tonight, not here, I'll call a car. You bring your daughter, there's a private cabana on the beach. I'll have a sitter set up a movie for her. You and we eat." He stared at her. "Why?" Delaney shrugged. "Because I like talking to you, because you look like you haven't had a real meal in weeks, and because, I don't know, I want to. He hesitated. You don't even know me. I know enough. And I think you could use someone to remind you that not everything has to be so hard all the time. He looked at her, at the way her eyes softened. Then he thought of Faye and how excited she'd be to watch a beach movie. Okay, he said, but only if you promise my daughter gets first pick on dessert. Deal. That night, Dylan stood barefoot on the sand in slacks and his cleanest button-up. Faye sat in a bean bag nearby, headphones on, eyes glued to a tablet playing her favorite movie. A gentle breeze swayed the lanterns above the private cabana, and the table was already set with candlelight and silverware that gleamed like it had never been touched. Then Delaney appeared, wearing a simple white dress, hair down, and a smile that made his heart ache. You clean up well, she said playfully. He laughed, rubbing the back of his neck. You're not too bad yourself. They sat down, and the servers brought out grilled lobster, wild rice, and roasted vegetables. Delaney poured wine into his glass before he could protest. I've never had lobster, he admitted. Her eyes widened. Seriously. Can't exactly grab it from the grocery store on a budget. Then tonight's a first, she said, raising her glass. He clinked his against hers. To firsts. They ate, laughed, and talked about everything from childhood memories to Faye's obsession with naming clouds. At one point, Dylan looked over at Faye napping peacefully in the bean bag, a blanket tucked around her. You're amazing with her, Delaney said softly. She's my whole world. Delaney looked at him for a long moment. You ever let anyone help you carry it? He looked away, not really an option. Well, she said gently, maybe it is now. He looked back at her, something stirring in his chest he hadn't felt in years. I hope. Then she leaned forward, voice quiet. I'm only here for another week, but I don't think I want to leave without knowing what this could be. Dylan swallowed hard. Delaney, I'm just a guy trying to keep his daughter fed. You're you. She reached across the table, taking his hand. And maybe that's exactly why I want to know you more. He looked at their hands. Her fingers were soft, his were rough, but in that moment they fit. And he didn't pull away. Do you always stare out at the ocean like you're waiting for it to give you answers? Delaney asked as she approached Dylan 2 days later, barefoot in the sand, her heels dangling from her fingers. Dylan turned at the sound of her voice. He stood just beyond the shoreline, his rolled sleeves damp with sea spray. Only when I've got a lot on my mind. She stopped beside him. You're not the only one. He glanced at her, noticing shadows under her eyes she hadn't had the night they'd shared dinner. Something wrong. I got a call this morning. My company's board wants me back in New York. They're threatening to vote on a merger I've blocked twice. She exhaled, watching the waves. I was supposed to be taking a break, but apparently even a week is too much. What happens if they vote? They sell half of Archer and Lion to a competitor that only sees us as leverage. Everything I've built gets gutted. Dylan studied her face. So fight it. Her lips curved, but not in amusement. You make it sound so simple. No, but I know what it's like to protect something that matters. If you're not there, they win. Delaney tilted her head, then looked back at the water. You always this clear-headed. Only when I'm not the one making the decision. She laughed quietly, then turned toward the path that led back to the resort. Walk me back. He nodded and fell into step beside her. As they passed the cabanas, Dylan glanced over his shoulder. Faye's with Marisol, she loves her. They're baking cupcakes in the staff kitchen. Delaney nodded. Good, I didn't want to interrupt anything. You're not. They walked in silence for a moment before she said, Do you think it's crazy that I'm here, dodging board meetings and letting myself feel something for someone I barely know? Dylan stopped walking. If it is, then I'm just as crazy. She faced him, the dying sunlight casting a golden glow on her features. I don't know what I'm doing, Dylan. I've spent years building walls. My life is strategy, control, knowing every outcome before I make a move. What about now? Now I'm standing in the middle of a maybe, and it scares the hell out of me. He looked down at her. I don't have much to offer, no safety net, no promises of a perfect life. I'm not asking for perfect. Then what are you asking for? She hesitated, something real. Dylan didn't reach for her, he didn't touch her at all, but his voice softened. Then let's stop pretending like this is just a vacation conversation. Delaney's throat worked as she swallowed. What if I stay another week? You'd be risking a lot. I already am. Later that evening, Dylan found Faye asleep on a pile of folded towels in the staff lounge, her cheeks dusted with flour. He carried her home carefully, her head resting on his shoulder, her little arms looped around his neck. The apartment was small but clean. He tucked her in, then stood at the door for a long time, staring at the quiet space. The next morning, Delaney sent a car. It wasn't a request, it was a sleek black vehicle with tinted windows and a driver holding a sign with his name. Faye squealed when she saw it, and Dylan's instinct was to shut it all down. But when he stepped outside, he found Delaney waiting. Not at the resort, at his building. She leaned against the car, wearing jeans and a windbreaker, her hair pulled into a messy knot. No makeup, no silk, just her. You tracked down where I live, he asked, half amused, half stunned. I asked Marisol. She shouldn't have told you. She didn't, Faye did. His eyes widened. She told you our address. She said, we live above the blue door with the crack in the window. Dylan groaned. She's 5, she doesn't know about privacy yet. Delaney grinned. Well, crack in the window blue door man, I'm here because I want to spend the day with you. Both of you. You want to hang out in my neighborhood. I don't want another rooftop dinner. I want to see where you buy groceries and which park Faye likes and why there's duct tape on your mailbox. He turned red. It's a long story. Good, she said. I like long stories. He looked at her, standing on his cracked sidewalk like she belonged there, and something in him shifted. They spent the day walking through his favorite corner of the city. Not the one you see on postcards, but the one with murals on alley walls and old men playing chess outside the bodega. Faye led Delaney by the hand like she'd done it 100 times. At the playground, Dylan sat back on the bench and watched them. Delaney pushed Faye in the swing, laughing as the little girl shouted higher, higher. Your daughter's fearless, Delaney said when she returned to sit beside him, brushing sand off her jeans. She gets it from her mom. Delaney turned to him. You never talk about her. She passed away 3 years ago, car accident. I'm sorry. So am I, every day. Delaney didn't offer platitudes. She just sat with him, letting the silence stretch. Eventually, he broke it. I thought I was done with relationships. I thought I needed to be. But then you showed up in that penthouse suite, looking like you'd never eaten a burger in your life, and somehow you saw me. Delaney looked down at her hands. You didn't try to impress me. You didn't treat me like a thing to win or a headline to chase. You were just honest. He nodded slowly. So now what? She turned to him. Now, tell you something I've never told anyone. He waited. I didn't come to the resort to relax. I came to run away. It was days from signing off on the merger. Days from letting everything go because I couldn't fight anymore. But then I met you, and suddenly, I wanted to fight again. Dylan reached over, his hand brushing hers. She didn't pull away. Then don't go back yet, he said. I have to, but I'm not leaving like I planned to. They sat in silence, watching Faye climb the jungle gym, her laughter echoing through the park. Delaney leaned against his shoulder, her voice soft. I've spent my life surrounded by people who want something from me. You're the first person who made me want something more for myself. Dylan closed his eyes. And for the first time in a long time, he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a dream he'd wake up from. The boardroom was too cold. Delaney stood at the glass wall of Archer and Lyon's Manhattan headquarters, staring down at the city as the senior executives filed in behind her. She'd flown in overnight, landed just before dawn, and hadn't slept since. The jet lag didn't matter. This meeting would decide everything. Miss Archer, one of the board members said as he took his seat, we were under the impression you had withdrawn from this vote. Delaney turned, her heels echoing on the floor. You assumed wrong. Murmurs passed across the table. She dropped a thick folder onto the conference table. That, she said, is a full audit of the terms you were about to sign without me. It shows exactly how much we'd lose. One of the older men frowned. You're fighting a done deal. No, Delaney said. I'm undoing a mistake you were about to make because I left for 7 days. She had never spoken like that in a boardroom before. Direct, personal, unapologetic. And she didn't feel the usual pressure to shrink herself. Because somewhere in a city park across the river, a little girl was probably chasing pigeons, and a man who had never once needed her money or her influence was waiting to see what kind of woman she really was. She won the vote by a single hand. Afterward, alone in her office, she stared at the photo on her desk, a corporate event from 2 years ago. Her smile in it looked polished, rehearsed. It didn't look anything like the one she'd worn when Faye had tackled her with a hug outside the bakery 2 mornings ago. She picked up her phone and dialed the resort's front desk. Hi, she said. This is Delaney Archer. I need to extend my stay. Of course, Miss Archer. For how long? She hesitated, then said, indefinitely. Later that night, Dylan opened his apartment door to find her standing in the hallway with a paper bag and windblown hair. I brought dinner, she said. It's from that Thai place you mentioned, the one next to the laundromat. He leaned against the doorframe. You came all the way here just to bring noodles. No, she said, came because I want to be where you are. He stepped aside to let her in. Faye was curled up on the sofa with a coloring book, and when she saw Delaney, she lit up. You're back. Delaney crouched down. I missed you. Faye held out a crayon. Want to help me finish the dinosaur? Dylan watched as Delaney sat cross-legged on the rug beside his daughter, the two of them debating whether a triceratops should be pink or blue. He rubbed the back of his neck, unsure what to do with the ache in his chest. Later, after Faye had fallen asleep, Dylan walked Delaney out onto the fire escape. The city stretched around them, all neon hush and distant sirens. Delaney leaned on the railing. I didn't sign the merger. He looked over at her. I went to the boardroom, I fought for what mattered, and I won, she said. That's incredible. I was terrified, but when I stood there, I kept thinking about you, about how you keep showing up, even when everything says you shouldn't be able to. He stayed quiet. I want to build something different now, she continued. Not just at work, in my life, something that doesn't start with strategy. You sure? He asked, because it come with a lot of chaos. I've had enough control to last me a lifetime. He looked at her then, really looked. Her eyes weren't hiding behind anything, not mascara, not corporate armor, not doubt. I've never done this, he admitted. Done what? Let someone in this far. Delaney stepped closer. Then let's figure it out together. He reached for her hand slowly. When their fingers touched, neither of them let go. 2 days later, Delaney invited him and Faye to a gallery opening in the city. "I know it's short notice," she said as they stood outside a boutique children's store, "but the artist is a friend. I want you two there." Dylan hesitated. "We don't have anything to wear to something like that." She nodded toward the store. "That's why we're here." Inside, a sales associate greeted Delaney by name and ushered them into a private fitting room. Dylan looked around at the shelves of tiny dresses and suits, clearly tailored for children of diplomats and movie stars. "Delaney," he started. "I'm not doing this to show off," she said quietly. "I want you both to feel like you belong in my world just as much as I want to stay in yours." Faye twirled in front of a mirror moments later, wearing a soft lavender dress with silver shoes. "Daddy, I look like a flower." "You do, sweetheart," he said, his throat tight. Delaney stepped out of the dressing room in a long navy gown, her hair swept up. Dylan blinked. "You look like trouble." She grinned. "Then I better have a good date." He stepped into the hallway, now dressed in a charcoal suit the staff had insisted he try. It fit better than anything he'd ever worn. Delaney's expression softened. "You clean up even better than I imagined." The gallery buzzed with energy that night. Champagne flutes clinked, art critics whispered, and cameras flashed, but Dylan didn't care about any of it. Not when Delaney was introducing him as someone important to her. Not when Faye held his hand tighter every time someone complimented her shoes. Not when Delaney looked up at him during the speech and smiled like the entire night had been built just for them. After the event, on the rooftop of the building, Delaney pulled him aside. "I'm staying," she said. He frowned. "The gallery?" "No, here, in the city. I bought a property uptown. I'm moving the company headquarters. I'm going to be where you are." Dylan stared at her. "You changed your whole life." She reached up, brushing her fingers along his jaw. "You made me want a different one." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their kiss wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was the kind of kiss that said, "I see you. I choose you. I'm not going anywhere." From the corner, Faye's voice piped up. "You what?" Delaney laughed against his chest. Dylan cradled the back of her head, smiling into her hair. "I think she's going to need some time to adjust." Delaney grinned. "That's okay. I'm not in a hurry." As they stood together under the city lights, Dylan realized something he hadn't dared believe weeks ago. This wasn't a break from reality. This was the beginning of something real. The elevator doors slid open to the top floor of the newly renovated Archer and Lyon headquarters, now nestled in a historic building near Central Park. Dylan held Faye's hand as they stepped into the sun-drenched lobby, greeted by sleek marble floors and modern glass walls that reflected the soft morning light. Faye held a small paper cup of apple juice, her eyes wide as she took in the tall ceilings and walls lined with framed black and white photographs. "This place is huge," she whispered, craning her neck to see the chandelier above them. Dylan gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "It's not a playground, so let's stick close, all right." Delaney waited by the conference room door, wearing a tailored navy suit and low heels, her hair in a soft twist. She looked nothing like the woman who had once worn a silk robe in a beachside penthouse, but her smile was familiar, and it was only for them. "You made it," she said, walking toward them. "I had to bribe her with a donut and 20 minutes of cartoons," Dylan said, motioning toward Faye. Delaney crouched down. "I've been in meetings all morning. Wanna help me escape for a little while?" Faye nodded solemnly. "Only if there's more juice." "There's a whole kitchen full of it," Delaney said, standing and taking Dylan's arm. "Come on, I want to show you something." She led them down a hallway lined with textured gray panels and stopped outside a pair of double doors. She opened them to reveal an office unlike any Dylan had ever seen, sunlight spilling over a long wall of bookshelves, an old record player in the corner, and a sprawling desk with 2 chairs pulled up side by side. Delaney walked behind the desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a small wooden box. She handed it to Faye. Inside was a collection of colored pencils arranged in perfect rows, each shade labeled in gold. "Every CEO needs an assistant," Delaney said. "Figured you might be mine on Fridays. You can draw while I work." Faye looked up at Dylan, eyes wide. "Can I?" He looked at Delaney, then nodded. "As long as you don't turn this place into a coloring book." Faye ran to the corner of the room, where a low table had already been set up with drawing paper and cushions. "How long have you been planning this?" Dylan asked, watching her. Delaney leaned against the windowsill. "Since the night at the gallery. I knew I wanted you both in this life, not just on the edges of it." He crossed the room, his voice quiet. "You know this isn't going to be easy." "I'm not asking for easy," she said. "I'm asking for real. For the missed lunches and school conferences and mornings when the coffee burns. For the parts no one puts in the brochures." He slipped his hands into his pockets. "I don't need an office or a title. I just want something solid, something that doesn't vanish when the lights come back on." Delaney stepped closer. "Then let's build it, a home, not just a story." He studied her, the woman who had once seemed untouchable, now standing in front of him in a room she'd made feel like theirs. "What about the board?" he asked. "They already think I've lost my mind," she said, "but they'll get used to the idea. I'm not interested in fitting into a mold anymore." That evening, Dylan stood in the middle of a sunlit brownstone foyer, holding a ring box in his hand. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that wrapped around you and made the world seem still. He looked around at the open floor plan, the bay windows, and the narrow staircase that led upstairs. Delaney stepped through the front door, carrying a folder in one arm and a grocery bag in the other. She paused when she saw him. "You're early," she said. He held up the ring box. "I didn't want to wait." She set the bag down slowly. "Is that what I think it is?" He opened the box. Inside sat a single gold band, simple and unadorned. "I can't give you a 10-carat diamond or a private island," he said. "But I can promise you this, I'll show up, every day, for you, for her, for whatever comes next." Delaney's eyes shimmered. "You're proposing in the hallway." "I wasn't sure where else to do it. We don't have a kitchen table yet." She reached out, her fingers closing over his. "Yes," she said softly. "Wherever we are, the answer is always yes." 3 weeks later, they exchanged vows in a quiet ceremony in the Botanical Garden in Brooklyn, surrounded by soft spring blooms and only a handful of people. Faye wore a pale yellow dress and scattered flower petals with a kind of seriousness that made everyone smile. Dylan wore a charcoal suit again, but this time it was tailored. Delaney wore a dress with no train, no veil, just a satin ribbon at her waist and a bouquet she'd picked from the garden herself. The vows were short, honest. No promises of forever carved in stone, but of love chosen again and again, even on the hard days. Afterward, they held a picnic under the wide oak tree near the pond. Faye chased ducks and giggled as Dylan tried to keep her from falling into the water. Delaney watched them from the blanket, her hands wrapped around a paper cup of lemonade, a soft wind tugging at the hem of her dress. Dylan sat beside her, brushing a leaf from her shoulder. "This is better than champagne and chandeliers." She nodded. "It's real." He looked at her, then at Faye, who had now convinced a waiter to give her a second slice of chocolate cake. "You know," he said, "when I knocked on that suite door, I thought I was just delivering a tray." Delaney leaned against him. "Turns out, You were delivering the rest of my life." They sat in the grass, arms tangled, the sounds of laughter and birdsong filling the air. The world felt wide open, not perfect, but finally completely theirs. Dylan adjusted the tie Faye had insisted on picking out for him. It had tiny green dinosaurs on it. A bold choice for a man heading into a fundraiser gala hosted by one of New York's most prestigious philanthropic foundations. Delaney stood behind him in the mirror, fastening a pair of delicate earrings, her gown a deep emerald that shimmered faintly in the dim hotel lighting. "I still don't get how I ended up on the guest list," Dylan said, tightening his collar with a slight grimace. "You're not on the guest list," Delaney replied, stepping into her heels. "You're the guest of honor." He turned. "What?" "I submitted your work with that local education nonprofit," she said, smoothing the front of his lapel. "They loved the idea of the mentorship program you've started. You're being recognized tonight." "You should have warned me." "You'd have found a way to get out of it," she said, kissing his cheek. "And I wanted to see your face when I told you." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not great in rooms like that." "You don't have to be. You're not there to impress anyone. You're there because people are finally seeing what I've known since the beginning." Faye came bouncing out from the bedroom in her pajamas, her hair in a loose braid and her hands clutching a stuffed turtle. "Can I stay up until you get back?" "No deals," Dylan said, kneeling in front of her. "But if you do, you'll be asleep before dessert, and I want to hear all about your dreams tomorrow morning." She pouted until Delaney knelt beside them and whispered something in her ear. Faye's eyes widened, and she nodded solemnly. "What did you say to her?" Dylan asked as they stood. "That there's a surprise waiting for her if she listens to the sitter and brushes her teeth." He narrowed his eyes playfully. "Bribery." "Strategic motivation." The car ride to the gala was quiet, but not in a tense way. Dylan sat with her hand in his, watching the city lights blur past the tinted windows. He wasn't used to being the focus of attention, but with Delaney beside him, the weight of it felt different, lighter somehow. At the venue, the chandeliers sparkled above a marble floor that stretched out beneath arched ceilings. Dylan had never seen so many tuxedos in one room, and for a moment, he hesitated near the entrance. Delaney leaned in. "Remember when you said you didn't belong in my world?" "Yeah. You were wronged." He followed her through the crowd, stopping often as people approached to shake his hand, compliment his work, ask questions about the mentorship program. He answered each one with quiet humility, unaware of the way Delaney watched him, pride softening every line of her face. When the lights dimmed and the stage lit up, Dylan's name was announced. He froze. "I told them to keep it short," Delaney said, nudging him forward. He made his way to the podium and looked out over a sea of expectant faces. Then, slowly, he began. "I didn't grow up with a lot of examples of what real support looked like," he said. "For a long time, I thought success was something other people earned. I worked hard, but I kept my head down because I didn't believe anything I built could matter." He glanced toward Delaney. "Then one day, someone saw something in me I hadn't let myself believe was there. And that changed everything." He kept it brief, stepping down to a warm round of applause and returning to his seat, where Delaney took his hand beneath the table. "You didn't tell me you were that good," she whispered, eyes glinting. "I didn't know I was." Later that night, after the crowd had thinned and the lights dimmed to a soft golden hue, they stepped out onto the private terrace overlooking the city. A violinist played somewhere inside, and the hum of conversation drifted faintly through the open doors. Delaney leaned on the balcony railing. "You realize this is the first time in years I've let someone else take the spotlight." He stood beside her. "Did it kill you?" "Not even close. In fact, I think I kind of loved it." He slipped his arm around her waist. There's something I've been thinking about. Should I be worried? That depends, he said. What would you say if I told you I want to take Faye on a camping trip next weekend? Just the two of us. She's been asking about sleeping under the stars. Delaney turned to him, surprised. I think she'd love that. I want her to have things I never did, not just the big gestures, the small ones too. She'll remember it for the rest of her life. And when we get back, he said, voice quieter now, I want to talk about expanding the program, taking it into more schools. I've got a few ideas. Delaney smiled. I've got the funding. He pulled her close. You gave me room to grow. You didn't try to rewrite me, just made space. You gave me something to believe in again. They stood there in the silence, wrapped in something that felt unshakable. Weeks passed, then months. The brownstone they'd started to call home slowly filled with the rhythm of shared life. Saturday pancake mornings. Evenings with records spinning and Faye dancing in mismatched socks. Dylan's mentorship program grew faster than expected, attracting attention from state officials and education advocates. Delaney supported without stepping in, letting his vision lead. One morning, as sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, Dylan woke to the sound of Faye whispering loudly in the hallway. She's still sleeping, don't burn the toast. He rolled over to see Delaney already awake, watching the door with a grin. You think she's trying to make breakfast? I think she and Marisol are plotting something. They stayed in bed a moment longer, listening to the chaos in the kitchen. I don't miss the silence, Dylan said. I don't either. That afternoon, they took a walk through Central Park, Faye skipping ahead with her stuffed turtle tucked under one arm. Dylan stopped beneath a tree and pulled Delaney close. You still glad you didn't sign that merger? She tilted her head. You still glad you said yes to dinner on the beach? He kissed her slow and certain, every day. Faye called out from ahead, come on, the turtles are out. They linked hands and followed, the path winding gently beneath the trees, sunlight dancing through the leaves. And for the first time in either of their lives, everything felt exactly where it was meant to be.